Welcome back to the Rowdy Rick Show. On today's episode, we're working on a N52, a BMW 328i, 2009, I believe. It has a no crank, no start issue going on, so we're about to take off the cowl and see if we could access the starter, give it a couple taps, see if that'll make a difference or not. It does have a code on the CAD system saying starter. Something about a starter, so that's the first thing I'm gonna check, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, so let's get this started. Removing the cowl was a pretty easy process. I think in total it was about 6 8mm bolts, 4 on the cabin air filter and 2 on the cowl. There's also 2 little rubber clips you gotta pull back so you could remove the cowl. Moving on to the front, you got 2 torque screws to remove this air dam, and 2 10mm bolts to remove the air filter housing. And you got to also remove the clamps that are clamped up to the air filter housing, which are 6mm bolts, or you could use a flathead, whichever is easier for you. Moving on to the throttle body, I tried removing the connection, but it was kind of hard, so I decided to remove the throttle body first and then remove the connection afterwards. In total, it was 4 10mm bolts that hold the throttle body into the
Okay, so the throttle body, there's a hose clamp right here, and this hose clamp sits in between these grooves. And in order for you to take out the throttle body, you gotta take off this bolt, but you can't get in there with an access, so you gotta loosen up the hose clamp first and then move it, and you'll be able to get to the bolt after you move it.
Now the bolts for the valve cover are just 5mm hex heads. Now as I was working on this car, I kind of figured that somebody had already been in this car working around here or something, because there was like some type of grease or Vaseline on a lot of these parts, as you can see right here on the diesel valve. On removing the intake manifold, I realized that the nuts and the bolts were size 11 on this, just the same as the M54. I'm not really a pro mechanic, so I don't know the procedures all too well. Like in this, for example, I tried to take off this breather hose and I really couldn't take it off, so I just decided to take it off from underneath the intake manifold instead of the back of the valve cover. It was a little easier that way. I just had better leverage to hook on these breather hoses and be able to unclamp them out. There was no room behind the valve cover. Now you will also need to remove this strut bar, at least one side of it, so that you can remove this intake manifold. You will also need to unplug the O2 sensors and the fuel line, because they're in the way a little bit. Also, the fuel line is also screwed onto the side of the manifold, so you got to make sure you get it from there. There's also 2 connectors on the inside of the intake manifold that you had to unclip to be able to take off the intake manifold. And also another breather hose right here next to the throttle body. That has to come out so that you can pull up on the throttle body without breaking it. Once that's out, you just got 2 bolts on the starter, one facing the transmission and one facing the engine. You just unscrew that and unscrew the starter, unplug it, and you're good to go. Easy as that. Pretty easy job if you ask me.
So as you guys can see, I took out the starter already. It was not that difficult. It was quite easy. It probably took me about, I want to say 30 to 45 minutes. Some of the harder parts were just unclipping those plastic breather hoses. Those are pretty annoying, you know. But other than that, we got it out. I tried to jump it to see if I could get it to engage, but I don't think I know how. Or if I don't know how, or I'm not doing it right, or maybe it's just broken. So what I'm gonna go do is I'm gonna go take this to AutoZone and see if they could test it out, and we'll see what happens from there. So we got the new starter, guys. I tested the old one out at O'Reilly's and it failed. It wasn't coming out fully. It wasn't fully extending, and I don't know, it just It wasn't working right. So we got the new one. Let's see if this one powers the car on. I'm hoping so. I think I'm just gonna put it in, plug it in, and try to start it without connecting everything else. And then if I get any codes or whatever, I'll just erase them, and then it'll be on its way. So let's go.
So what I'm doing here is just connecting the starter back up and plugging it in, plugging in the O2 sensors, connecting the fuel line once again, and then just going ahead and crank the car and see if it cranks over. At this point, I cranked the car over and it started, so I just turned it off and continued putting everything back together. It's when I realized that I should have took the battery out or unplugged it at least, because the fuel pump kept pumping and I was spilling gas everywhere. So I just ran to the back and unplugged the battery real quick. Funny story about this car though, it's my neighbor's car, and he came to me a couple days ago talking about his car broke down. He was actually showing it to a potential client because he's selling it, and he said he went to the parts store to buy some light bulbs because one of his light bulbs was out. And he went with the guy, and when he was at the parts store, he got back in the car and it wouldn't crank over and it wouldn't crank over. And he was just kind of stumped, you know, and he didn't know what to do. But the guy at the AutoZone told him, he's like, oh, it's probably your key. Your key got unprogrammed. You need to reprogram your key. And I don't know what. They charged his battery. They tried to jump start him and everything. Nothing happened. So he was here at the house, and I was like, I'll take a look at it. So I tried to crank, and I saw the same symptoms as starter. I have an E60 outside the house right now. It's parked with the same symptoms. It's no crank, no start. You know, relays fine, this and that, but it's just a bad starter. So just gonna have to replace the starter on that one, just like we did on this one. Except the E60 has an N62 engine, so it's gonna be a little bit more difficult. Not as easy as this job. This job, no lie, probably took me about 2 hours in total, you know, and like another hour to go get the parts, so 3 hours in total. But it's a nice little job. I charged my neighbor about $500 just for this job, you know. I got the part for him, and I charged him for the labor, so altogether, part and labor, it was like $500. But you know, $500 in 2-3 hours, you know, I'll take it. And he was pretty happy with the job. He said he's gonna just turn around and flip the car, so nothing too serious. He was willing to pay it. He didn't try to negotiate or anything like that. And I basically told him as well, like, hey, if you want me to do this job, I'll do it, but it's gonna be $500. You know, if you want to, cool. If you don't, then cool as well. You know, but anywhere you go, they're gonna charge you like $300 for the starter plus labor. So it's up to you what you want to do at the end of the day. All in all, this was a pretty fun job. You know, it was pretty fun. I enjoyed doing this job. You know, I'm not a professional mechanic. I mean, I am a mechanic, but I've only been doing it for about a year. So in reality, I'm still kind of an amateur. But as you can see, everything went back together pretty smooth. My brother was helping me out right here. You know, we're already at the finish line. So it's like, hey, just have me put on all this cowl and all this stuff back. That way I called the guy and tell him his car's ready, come pick it up. That way we could just go get a beer and finish up the night right here in the garage, clean up, put the tools away, and get ready for tomorrow.
So there it is, guys. Starter's in. It worked. Turned on. No check engine lights. Everything went back the way it was supposed to go. Now we're just gonna go return the car back to the neighbor and make sure he's happy with the job we did. Until next time.